stop-loss order on your worries. Would you like to know how to make money on the stock exchange? Well, so would a million other people, and if I knew the answer, this book would sell for a fabulous price. However, there's one good idea that some successful operators use. This story was told to me by Charles Roberts, an investment counselor with offices at 17 East 42nd Street, New York.
I originally came up to New York from Texas with $20,000 which my friends had given me to invest in the stock market, Charles Roberts told me. I thought, he continued, that I knew the ropes in the stock market, but I lost every cent. True, I made a lot of profit on some deals, but I ended up by losing everything. I did not mind so much losing my own money, Mr. Roberts explained, but I felt terrible about having lost my friends' money, even though they could well afford it. I dreaded facing them again after our venture had turned out so unfortunately, but, to my astonishment, they not only were good sports about it, but proved to be incurable optimists.
I knew I had been trading on a hit-or-miss basis and depending largely on luck and other people's opinions. As H.I. Phillips said, I had been playing the stock market by ear. I began to think over my mistakes, and I determined that before I went back into the market again, I would try to find out what it was all about. So I sought out and became acquainted with one of the most successful speculators who ever lived, Burton S. Cassels. I believed I could learn a great deal from him because he had long enjoyed the reputation of being successful year after year, and I knew that such a career was not the result of mere chance or luck.
He asked me a few questions about how I had traded before and then told me what I believe is the most important principle in trading. He said, I put a stop-loss order on every market commitment I make. If I buy a stock at, say, $50 a share, I immediately place a stop-loss order on it at $45. That means that when and if the stock should decline as much as 5 points below its cost, it would be sold automatically, thereby limiting the loss to 5 points. If your commitments are intelligently made in the first place, the old master continued, your profits will average 10, 25, or even 50 points. Consequently, by limiting your losses to 5 points, you can be wrong more than half of the time and still make plenty of money.
I adopted that principle immediately and have used it ever since. It has saved my clients and me many thousands of dollars. After a while, I realized that the stop-loss principle could be used in other ways besides in the stock market. I began to place a stop-loss order on any and every kind of annoyance and resentment that came to me. It has worked like magic. For example, I often have a luncheon date with a friend who is rarely on time. In the old days, he used to keep me stewing around for half my lunch hour before he showed up. Finally, I told him about my stop-loss orders on my worries. I said, Bill, my stop-loss order on waiting for you is exactly 10 minutes. If you arrive more than 10 minutes late, our luncheon engagement will be sold down the river and I'll be gone.
Man alive! How I wish I had had the sense, years ago, to put stop-loss orders on my impatience, on my temper, on my desire for self-justification, on my regrets, and on all my mental and emotional strains. Why didn't I have the horse sense to size up each situation that threatened to destroy my peace of mind and say to myself, see here, Dale Carnegie, this situation is worth just so much fussing about and no more? Why didn't I?
However, I must give myself credit for a little sense on one occasion, at least. And it was a serious occasion, too, a crisis in my life, a crisis when I stood watching my dreams and my plans for the future and the work of years vanish into thin air. It happened like this. In my early 30s, I had decided to spend my life writing novels. I was going to be a second Frank Norris or Jack London or Thomas Hardy. I was so in earnest that I spent 2 years in Europe where I would live cheaply with dollars during the period of wild, printing press money that followed the First World War. I spent 2 years there, writing my magnum opus. I called it The Blizzard.
The title was a natural, for the reception it got among publishers was as cold as any blizzard that ever howled across the plains of the Dakotas. When my literary agent told me it was worthless, that I had no gift, no talent, for fiction, my heart almost stopped. I left his office in a daze. I couldn't have been more stunned if he had hit me across the head with a club. I was stupefied. I realized that I was standing at the crossroads of life, and had to make a tremendous decision. What should I do? Which way should I turn? Weeks passed before I came out of the daze. At that time, I had never heard of the phrase "put a stop-loss order on your worries." But as I look back now, I can see that I did just that. I wrote off my 2 years of sweating over that novel for just what they were worth, a noble experiment, and went forward from there. I returned to my work of organizing and teaching adult education classes, and wrote biographies in my spare time, biographies and nonfiction books such as the one you are reading now.
Am I glad now that I made that decision? Glad? Every time I think about it now, I feel like dancing in the street for sheer joy. I can honestly say that I have never spent a day or an hour since, lamenting the fact that I am not another Thomas Hardy. One night a century ago, when a screech owl was screeching in the woods along the shore of Walden Pond, Henry Thoreau dipped his goose quill into his homemade ink and wrote in his diary, "The cost of a thing is the amount of what I call life, which is required to be exchanged for it immediately or in the long run." To put it another way, we are fools when we overpay for a thing in terms of what it takes out of our very existence.
Yet that is precisely what Gilbert and Sullivan did. They knew how to create gay words and gay music, but they knew distressingly little about how to create gaiety in their own lives. They created some of the loveliest light operas that ever delighted the world, Patience, Pinafore, The Mikado. But they couldn't control their tempers. They embittered their years over nothing more than the price of a carpet. Sullivan ordered a new carpet for the theater they had bought. When Gilbert saw the bill, he hit the roof. They battled it out in court, and never spoke to one another again as long as they lived. When Sullivan wrote the music for a new production, he mailed it to Gilbert, and when Gilbert wrote the words, he mailed it back to Sullivan. Once they had to take a curtain call together, but they stood on opposite sides of the stage and bowed in different directions, so they wouldn't see one another. They hadn't the sense to put a stop-loss order on their resentments, as Lincoln did.